Welcome on into Three Bold Takes. It's Quinn, it's Chase, and it's Freddie. We're looking at different teams in this series and what would make a successful season for them in 2024. Currently, in this video, we're going to be looking at Oregon, looking at their schedule, breaking it down, maybe seeing what is going to make them successful. Quinn, let me toss it to you first. Talk to us about Oregon in the Big Ten.
Yeah, Oregon 2024 transition into the Big Ten. They get both of the traditional Big Ten powerhouses this year with Ohio State and Michigan. Other notable games on the schedule, Wisconsin and Washington. For me, man, when it comes to Oregon, this year's about proving that you got a real thing going in Eugene. I think there is some exposable gaps in the Big Ten this year. And I think from a roster setup, Oregon's definitely, for me, on the short list of teams that could win the conference this year. I will accept you slipping up in one of those games between Wisconsin, Washington, Michigan, Ohio State, one of those in particular. I think you got to make the playoffs this year for Oregon. I need to see you make the playoffs, and not only make the playoffs. I think for it to be a successful year for Oregon this year, they need to get to what would be the quarterfinal round. So be one of the last 8 teams left. I don't think getting in one of the lower spots, 3 through 12, and losing in the first round, I don't think that's a successful year for Oregon this year. I think they should be better than that. So we'll see what Oregon pulls off in 2024. But for me, I think getting to the quarterfinals of the playoffs and really having a strong regular season is what I would expect to see this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the same lines as well. Obviously, last year, Oregon almost made the playoffs, the 14 playoff. They lost to Washington twice by a combined 6 points, I believe it was. So very competitive with a team that went to the national championship. Now that you're out of the Pac-12, and I said this about Texas coming to the SEC, your games against Purdue, like at Purdue the week after Ohio State, like those are no longer like the Arizona States of the world, the Colorados of the world, like that you could just walk all over. Like these are like legitimate football teams that have pulled major upsets against number one ranked teams year and year and year and year after year after year. It just seems like it always happens, especially in the Big Ten. Quinn, you alluded to it. Obviously, the 4 games, Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Washington. You have to win all but one. I think to be successful if you're Oregon, and this is a message to Dan Lanning too. This is where you prove, just like you said, Quinn, that not only you have something going, but that you are the coach that people thought you were. I mean, you were in talks to become the next head coach at Alabama. That's a huge honor and praise, in my opinion, when Nick Saban retired. So you have to be able to stay above water. And in the Big Ten, I would say if they don't come in the top 3 in the Big Ten, now I know it's just like the SEC, there are no divisions anymore. So if you don't come in the top 3, it is a terrible year if you're an Oregon fan, in my opinion, especially with this schedule. Now, obviously, you've got Ohio State at home, which Oregon proved 2 years ago that they can beat Ohio State. They went to Ohio State and beat them 2 years ago on the road. And then you go at Michigan, but it's a down Michigan this year. So you've got a favorable schedule, right? You still play UCLA and Washington from the Pac-12 as well. So and Oregon State, your in-state rival. So make the playoffs, obviously. Top 3 in the Big Ten. And I say, man, I'm almost tempted to say semifinals of the playoffs, but I think that bar is a little high, especially with a first year starting quarterback that Oregon's going to have with Bo Nix gone. It's going to be a little bit different. So I agree, quarterfinals, but you have to be top 3 in the Big Ten. Chase?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go a little bit different route. You guys are looking at like their season as a whole. I think a big success for me is making sure the Pac-12 offense and defense works in the Big Ten. That's something I'm going to look at hard. Dan Lanning, a good defensive coach as well, making sure that can play and hold up against the likes of Michigan, against Ohio State. You also got to replace Bo Nix, Bucky Irving, and Troy Franklin on the offensive side of the ball, which is enormous. So not only do you have to show that your offense can hold up in the Big Ten's staunch defensive era, but you've got to replace some heavy offensive skill players that have manned your ship for a while now. I think Bo Nix just finished his 10th year at Oregon or something like that. So he's you got to find somebody new there. So, but I think those are the biggest things. I also think you need to go undefeated against the former Pac-12 teams that you're going to play as well. Your Oregon State, your UCLA, your Washington. Washington's kind of in the same boat as Michigan in a down year. So those should be easy wins. A successful season to me, only loss on the record is to Ohio State in the regular season. And that should be a very close loss, come down to a final possession. For playoffs, they got to be in the playoffs, but I think they should be a top 2 team in the Big Ten, even in their first year. This is a lot like if you watched our Texas video. If you haven't, go watch it. But this is just like Texas. You're coming into a new conference, but that doesn't matter. You have a sense about you that you're supposed to be successful, and you need to carry that on into the Big Ten. So that's what I'm looking at for Oregon this season. Any other thoughts, fellas?
Real quick, you bringing up the transitioning of different play styles. Is there any part of you guys that are worried when you look at Oregon's track record, not necessarily last year, but the year before when they played Utah, a team that's like really good at being physical on the line of scrimmage up front, forcing the run game on you and playing really hard-nosed defense? That describes about, I'd say 70-ish% of the Big Ten. Like a lot of your lower tier teams, your Illinois, your Purdue's, your Wisconsins, they win by playing you that way. I mean, heck, Iowa won, 10 games last year, and they punted on almost every single drive.
Yep.
Like, that's just how the Big Ten plays. So is there any part of you that's worried about that transition for Oregon? I know we all have high praise for them. Quarterfinal to be a successful year seems to be the gist of it, but are you concerned that the style of play could really trip them up?
I think the style of play week after week might get a little tiring. You used to only play Utah once a year, right? Maybe twice in the conference title, but I think week after week it may lean on them. I'm looking at the training staff. How are they going to handle the injuries, the bangs, the beat down that's going to happen? There's going to be a lot of change that Oregon's going to have to do internally.
Yeah, I think for me, yes, Quinn, because look at the one team they lost to last year twice, Washington. Look how physical they played with them and how their coach outsmarted them at a lot of points. And that's the biggest thing. And they escaped Utah last year. I don't believe they played Utah at all, so which kind of helped them. But when you bring it in and you look at it, that's exactly how everybody's going to play. Illinois, Wisconsin. Guess what? Those teams are probably going to finish with 7 wins, 8 wins, but they're going to play really tough, and that's what I'm looking at for Oregon this season, is making sure that they can set up correctly on the defensive side of the ball and also play their type of offense. I think that's it for us on the Oregon successful season episode, guys. Thank you so much for joining the 3 Bold Takes team, and Quinn, Chase, and Freddie. We love having you. Make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know what you think about Oregon's upcoming 2024 season.